Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. Well, hello. It's a solo episode with yours truly. And it's a long time since I did one of these. It was back in November, and it was just prior to the US election, and I was on absolute tenterhooks. But my goodness me, we did get the change that I was so desperately hoping for. And I am actually very excited that we now have a midlife woman of colour in the White House. That feels like a huge result for me. I know that a lot of people are still not keen on this Democratic team, but I got to the stage of thinking that pretty much anything that wasn't Trump was good, to be honest, and I couldn't bear the thought of another 4 years of what we'd had. So I'm absolutely delighted, and I'm reserving judgment as well. I'm trying to just take a view on this new team based on their actions and actually what is happening, and so far so good, it seems to me. Bit of a mess on the US Capitol, wasn't there? Oh my goodness me, that really brought it home to me how fragile democracy is. And we take it for granted, don't we, here in the West? I really think we take it for granted, and we are apathetic about participating and doing our bit. So let's not be apathetic when it comes to voting, whether that be locally or nationally, or just making our voices heard about global issues. It's important. It's important that we speak up and that our voices are counted. But it really does feel rather different. The news here seems to be getting better. Here in London and in the UK, we're still on full lockdown. In fact, I was talking to a very lovely lady in America this morning, and I was telling her exactly what that meant. And it does mean that, you know, we're allowed out of the house to go and exercise or buy food or go to work, but anything else is pretty much frowned on, although there are lots of people who don't seem to take complete notice of the rules. In my local park, they have various outdoor exercise areas, and through the different lockdowns, we've had different types of fencing them off. And this last version was a very rudimentary sort of sign and a little bit of a barrier around the outside saying do not use. And of course, everybody ignored that. So when I went for my run the other day, I realised they'd put up those kind of festival fences, you know, like what you get round the side at the big festivals in the park. So they're about 8 foot tall and they appear to be made of metal. You're not going to get through them unless you dig under them. So we had thoughts of whether some sort of die-hard fitness fanatics had been burrowing underneath these and setting up camp inside just so that they could use the gym equipment. You know, it might be the case that using the gym equipment in the park isn't a massive spreader, but if you're going to ignore that rule, then you're going to ignore other rules. So where does the buck stop when you're trying to get the message across to people to follow the damn rules? Tricky one, that. But it does feel a little bit more positive here. We've had the roadmap set out for how we're going to come out of lockdown. And there are some dates to look forward to. I think June the 21st is the big one when life won't be going back to normal, because I don't think it's ever going to go back to normal. And I've said before, I don't want it to go back to normal because I didn't like the old normal. But there is a date when we may be able to move around again, and I may be able to go and see my mum, and that will be less than a year since I've seen her. You know, less than a year. I should be grateful for that, shouldn't I? Of course, I'm not. It's August of last year since I've seen my mum, and all the plans at Christmas We got our plans for our 5 days. My husband was going to go up to Yorkshire and see his kids, and I was going to go to Birmingham and see my mum. And then that all just sort of disappeared. That's the hardest bit for me, actually, is not being able to go and see her. She's 86 years old. And while I am very sorry for the young people who are suffering so badly and the kids not in school, I can't help thinking that when you're 86, you just don't have time to waste, especially when you're alone and you can't go and see anybody and you can't have anybody come to see you. And that is just really, really hard. We've got some good systems in place. I can do the online shopping for her now. My brother's just around the corner, which is fantastic. I can occasionally get her to do FaceTime. She struggles with it, but she keeps trying, so she can do FaceTime. We've even taken to doing the crossword over the phone or over FaceTime together, and she really enjoys that. But it's so hard for her. She's just got 4 walls to look at, day in, day out. And she can only talk to people on the phone and only me on FaceTime. So it's really tough. But the good news is she had her jab, and I guess she's probably now halfway through to getting her second jab. So she has an awful lot more protection than she had before. So for that, I am incredibly grateful. And if anybody listening to this is thinking that they won't get the jab, please think again. Please try and have it, unless you are planning to live a completely isolated life forever, because the more people that get the jab, as the figures have now shown, the more the hospital admissions go down, because while we may get sick and we may still be able to carry it, we don't get as sick. So we don't need to be hospitalised, so we don't need to put pressure on the NHS, which takes away the services that the NHS can be giving to other people who are very sick and waiting for treatment, but, have to go to the bottom of the queue. So, go get the jab. I'm waiting for my jab. I'm in the 50s bracket, so shouldn't be too long. I shall get my request to go and get the jab. It should be fun. So I've had some most amazing podcasts in this latest season. And if you haven't listened already, go and have a listen. I kicked off with the quite remarkable Jessica Buchanan, who is the New York Times bestselling co-author of Impossible Odds, which is a memoir that she wrote about her 93 days held captive in the desert in Somalia by Somaliland pirates. I was amazed when she agreed to be on my podcast. One of the delights of doing what I do is that I meet all sorts of women, and usually over social media. I had shared Jess's podcast interview on another podcast on social media because I was just so blown away by her. And she responded, and I said, I'd love to have you on my podcast. A bit flippantly, really. I said, but I think you're too young. And she said, no, I'm not. I'm not too young. I'd love to be on your podcast. So she was on my podcast, and her story, it's 9 years now since this happened to her, but her story seems so timely, because when we are all struggling against what really feels like impossible odds, when you listen to Jess and her story of survival, real survival, and then surviving the survival after she was rescued by Navy SEAL Team 6, the team that found Osama bin Laden, then you realise what impossible odds really are. It really helped me to just dig a little bit deeper into my own reserves of resilience, to be able to appreciate that while it's difficult now, I have my home, I have Netflix, I have heating, I have water, I have toilet paper, I have food, basic things. I have medicine should I need it. We're actually pretty fortunate, even though it's also pretty awful. Most of us anyway. I know that I am very lucky that I still don't have to worry too much about finances. And I know that a lot of people are really suffering. It's awful when I go out actually and I see all the closed up businesses and the closed up shops. And I think, how on earth are these people coping? How are they making ends meet? But anyway, if you want to hear a very inspiring woman telling a very inspiring story, go and listen to episode 61, Surviving a Somali Desert Kidnapping with Jessica Buchanan. Then my second episode in the latest season, I completely switched gears, and it's all about menopause. I interviewed Jackie Lynch, who's written a book called The Happy Menopause. And as I say on the intro to that podcast, you probably imagine that I quite like that title, because I want menopause to not be this, thing to be dreaded, but for us all to be prepared, not scared, so that we can reap the benefit of it. And again, with the lady I was talking to this morning, whose name was Dara, you might be listening to this, Dara, and she talked about how when we're younger, we talk about what, don't we? We ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? But when we get to midlife, we start to think about, who do we want to be? Who do we want to be now? Who are we now? And I said to Dara, I think that is the gift of menopause, because when we lose some or most of the estrogen as we go through the perimenopause years, we lose what I call the biddable hormone. Estrogen is the hormone that keeps us nurturing people. It keeps us putting ourselves last. It makes sure that we tend to, not always, but we tend to comply. We tend to not rock the boat. We tend not to get too angry, because we want to nurture and build rather than causing damage. But when the estrogen is gone, we can then start focusing on who we want to be. So I think that transition from what to who that Dara was so cleverly pointing out to me, that I hadn't ever thought of it in those terms, but that to me is the gift of menopause. So the happy menopause is all about how we can better manage our experience of the menopause, and it all comes back to managing our blood sugar levels and reducing the stress, either perceived or real, that our body responds to. And I know the importance of this, because when I had the early menopause at 41, I went to see a nutritionist, put me on a special diet, which was very much focused on maintaining blood sugar levels so that they were not spiking, and therefore me putting stress on my adrenal glands, and I got my periods back. So that was when I really learnt the importance of diet and lifestyle in terms of our menopause experience. And I just love this book, and I love what Jackie has put together. So there's so much good information in there. Jackie says that, HRT may well help you, but if you don't sort out your diet and lifestyle, it's not going to fix things. It's just going to kind of be a bit like a Band-Aid. It's, you need to have the good diet and the lifestyle as well as the HRT if you want to go down the HRT route, or you just do the good diet and the good lifestyle. It's not either or. We have to think about our overall well-being at every stage, really. Episode 63, with probably my coolest guest ever, Makeda Smith. She is just incredible. She started pole dancing when she was 50, when her life had fallen apart. She was feeling suicidal. She needed something to distract her, I think, probably, and to give her her oomph back. And she went and started pole dancing. And she's now 60. She is still pole dancing. She is an erotic dancer, and she teaches both erotic dancing and pole dancing. And she's on a mission to enable all women to unleash their inner goddess. And she says sexy never gets old. And she talks about this incredible woman that she met on Hollywood Boulevard who was doing a split. And this woman told her that she was 75. And she said to Makeda, she said, "Darling, they lied to us. Aging is fabulous." You have to listen to Makeda saying it, much better than me saying it. It's just an amazing interview. She's so much fun. We had such a giggle. So go and have a listen to that. And then I've just, literally as I'm recording this today, I've published a podcast with the very lovely Alisoun Mackenzie. And Alisoun is a coach and an author and a retreat leader and a speaker, but she is particularly passionate about enabling all of us to make more of a difference in the world. So she, funnily enough, she had a very similar background to me, in that we both sort of grew up in the financial world, and we both decided that it really wasn't doing it for us the older we got and the more it conflicted with our values. And she decided to make it her mission that she would make more of a difference in the world. So she went from being a stockbroker to building schools in Africa and East Asia. And she carries on doing that today, and she facilitates other women being able to participate. In the podcast, we also talk about the dangers of white saviorism and the importance of working out when we want to go and help abroad. Are we doing it because we want to help people, or are we doing it actually to make ourselves feel better? And are we approaching it as a saviour and trying to save people who may need help but do not need saving? So it's a fantastic 7th season so far, and we've got some amazing interviews coming up for you as well. So please do share the podcast. I'm very proud of this podcast. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life, actually. It's funny because both my parents work for the BBC, and my dad was a music producer for Radio Birmingham, and he was a radio announcer. He even did the announcing on telly in the Midlands once. And my mum worked for the BBC World Service, and she was a studio manager. And when I came out of university, I wanted to go and work for the BBC, and I couldn't get in. I wasn't, I failed the interview process, and I felt like a real failure. And now, in my 50s, I'm broadcasting my own radio show. Effectively, it's a radio show, it's a podcast, isn't it? So that's rather nice. I like that I can do that. I meet the most incredible women, as you know, and I share their stories, and that's what I'm all about, is sharing these stories so that I can inspire other women to realise that the sky's the limit, really, and that I want to inspire women to step forward, to step up, not to step back, not to become invisible, but to step forward and be really visible, because it's as much about our mindset as, how we may look and the space that we're prepared to take up in the world. And I like to say that, when we're done making babies, we're ready to make solutions. So please go and share my podcast if you enjoy it. And I look forward to bringing ever more inspiring guests to your ears. And I'm so grateful to you for listening to me wittering on occasions, and I hope you continue to be my listener. So thank you very much. I think there is an end in sight to this COVID nightmare, and hopefully you will be able to start thinking about what you might want to do in your next chapter when this nightmare is over, or even while this nightmare is still going on. Why not start planning it now? So I have all sorts of resources on my website, magnificentmidlife.com. I do one-to-one mentoring, I have group programs, I have a monthly members club where you can have access to me and do weekly coaching. Come and check it out. Why not? If not now, then when? But if you're feeling exhausted, because it's been a really, really long, hard road recently, hasn't it? Please take time to look after yourself, build your resilience. Think in terms of some radical replenishment. What do you need to do to make sure that you are okay on a day-to-day basis, so that when we can get off the starting block, so to speak, you are ready and raring to go. So take good care, and thanks for staying with me. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.